After World War II, the Communist Republic of Yugoslavia, consisting of Bosnia-Herzegovina, Montenegro, Croatia, Serbia, Slovenia, and Macedonia, was formed. After the death of leader Joseph Tito in 1980, a sense of growing nationalism began seeping into the various republics, and the threat of war became imminent. The tension reached a peak when Bosnia declared its independence from Yugoslavia, and Bosnian Serbs put efforts into joining the state of Greater Serbia to the east. However, Muslim Bosniaks, which represented the majority of the population within Bosnia, and Catholic Croats were in opposition to this annexation, and as a result became the victims of an ethnic conflict which pitted Bosniaks and Croats against the Bosnian Serbs. Rape, torture, and massacres were the main tactics used against the Croats and Bosniaks, in an awful parallel to the Holocaust that took place 50 years prior on the same continent. However, 50 years later, one of the worst genocides to take place since the Holocaust happened in Bosnia, and the world once again turned a blind eye. 21 years later, after the Bosnian-Serbian War, we'd like to recount the events of what was and what led to the Bosnian Genocide.
It all began after the declaration of independence of Bosnia and Herzegovina from Yugoslavia in 1992. At the time, Bosniak Muslims, Croats, and Bosnian Serbs, which were Serbian ethnic groups living in Bosnia, made up the population. However, the Bosnian Serbs and the state of Serbia to the east sought to annex Bosnia for Serbia, creating one big Serbian state. Using the power of the Republika of Srpska, a Serbian legislative branch of Bosnia, the command of the Bosnian Serb army, and forces from Serbia under Slobodan Milosevic, the leader of Srpska, Radovan Karadzic, systematically killed thousands of Bosnian Muslims and Catholic Croats in Bosnia who were opposed to the annexation. In a similar fashion to the Holocaust in Europe, concentration camps were used as sites for mass extermination. Here, men, women, and children were shot, starved, or tortured in an effort to have ethnic cleansing. Most horrific of these crimes were the rape of thousands of Bosnian women, resulting in the birth of rape babies that were left to die or were displaced even to today. The difference between this genocide and other genocides around the world was the continued news coverage from inside Bosnia, covering all the horrific atrocities being committed by the Bosnian Serbs.
Bosnia's capital, Sarajevo, was under attack. The Bosnian Serbs shelled the city, cut the power, and blocked the roads. Snipers were everywhere.
It may already be too late to save tens of thousands of people.
I was there, reporting on the siege, a ruthless 3-year attempt to drive the Muslims out of their multi-ethnic city.
Despite the people's and news reporters' plea for the UN and US intervention, help never came until after the massacre at Srebrenica, which was the site of the death of 8,000 Muslim men and boys.
Today, we will talk to 3 witnesses of this genocide: a Muslim Bosniak survivor, a U.S. diplomat who cried bloody murder while the genocide was taking place, and former President Ravidon, who led this heinous crime. Thank you for coming to the show today. Could you please tell me how and why you were captured?
The only reason I can think of being taken was my faith and my gender. I was taken from the gymnasium where me and 100 other Bosnian Muslim women were in Kalanovic. I was only 16 at the time, and they screamed at us to do as they said. I'm sorry, but can we move on to the next question?
Of course. How were you treated at the hands of the Bosnian Serbs?
They raped us, all of us. I still remember my first night. They pointed and chose us out as if we were playthings. Then they dragged us, kicking and screaming, to their rooms. They were cruel, and once they were finished, they would toss us aside. The only way to be spared from this torture was to become pregnant. I often wake up at night with the faces, voices, and touch of my rapists on me. No woman can understand the pain we feel from this, not unless she was there, and I pray to God she wasn't.
What was the general attitudes towards the UN efforts to help the victims of this genocide?
Most of us had felt like the world had left us. They were seeing what was happening and turned their backs, ignoring the death and rape of thousands. The UN was there but was reluctant to do anything. Even refugees that were located at their camps weren't safe for long. Srebrenica is a perfect example of this. It was protected by only 450 unprepared Dutch soldiers, and when the Serbs decided to take it, the UN were helpless to do anything. The worst part was that the international community knew something was going to happen, but decided it wasn't worth their time.
We came there with a will to do as much as we could do, but we failed.
What are the relations between Bosnian Serbs, Croats, and Muslim Bosniaks in present-day Bosnia?
It's rare to find someone still completely filled with hatred, but even as we forgive each other, we still know people who have suffered. The children born from the rape of women like me, with not even a birth certificate to help them survive in the world. The women disowned after being raped, forced to survive on their own after the horrible things done to them, living with depression and other physical and mental scars. There are still obvious tensions between us, especially in politics. Still, it's useless to remain in the past. All we can do is remember what happened in order to prevent events like the genocide of my people and the Holocaust from happening again.
The horrors of the Bosnian Genocide went largely unnoticed by the major powers of the world, even though it was one of the most largely broadcasted events at the time. However, there is one particular individual who strives to take action against this crime, and his name is Richard Holbrooke. How did the world respond when it learned of the genocide taking place in Bosnia?
What sets this genocide from the rest is that the media was all over the place. You can't say that we didn't see it happening without a doubt. When Bush was president, he had no desire to take action in Bosnia. I tried to push on Bush that we needed to take action, but he wouldn't do it. Now, when Clinton was running for president, I was in full support, because he promised to take action on Bosnia. But the question is, will he keep that promise? The UN as well didn't take the necessary actions needed to stop this genocide. They sent food and medical supplies to the refugees of Bosnia, but what sickens me is that they had to negotiate with the Bosnian Serbs face to face in order to get to the refugees. Sometimes they wouldn't get to them. The UN should have shot their way into the refugees and rescued them. In Srebrenica, the UN only sent 450 peacekeepers as protection. Srebrenica was a safe haven. Unfortunately, the Serbs easily took over Srebrenica. Many Muslims either fled to the mountains or they were murdered in Srebrenica. Ultimately, the world was basically a bystander in this genocide, and when we finally took action, it was too late. This was the greatest failure of the West since the 1930s.
Why did you feel such a need to intervene when the whole world kept silent?
This was genocide. You couldn't call it genocide without taking any action. Yes, we gave supplies to the refugees, but we didn't do anything to stop the violence. There needed to be some kind of force stopping these monsters. In 1992, I was sent to Bosnia as an envoy. I was in the streets of Banja Luka, and there I saw soldiers with weapons everywhere. Bosnian Serbs were forced to sign their property as well as their lives. There were snipers positioned in buildings to pick you off Muslims in the streets. Banja Luka was a place of pure evil. I took the stand, and I believe I was correct. I was not willing to stand by allowing the Serbs to inflict more misery on so many innocent civilians.
Now, I will introduce one of the orchestrators behind this systematic extermination. He has just been convicted of crimes against humanity and has been sentenced to 40 years in prison. His name is President Radovan. When you first entered office, did you harbor a hatred for the non-Serbian people of Bosnia?
As the president of a proud nation, the Republic of Srpska, I was tasked with promoting peace for us Serbs in Bosnia. Muslims have to be in the way of our unification of Serbia.
Why did you and Ratko Mladic order the killing of more than 8,000 Muslim men and boys at Srebrenica and the torture of thousands of other Bosniaks and Croats?
Well, as both of us were leaders of the Bosnian Serb army, we needed to show the UN not to mess with our goal of a Serbian state. So we attacked the Dutch peacekeepers and saw an opportunity to further eliminate our opposition.
How do you feel now that the world has learned and acted against your past crimes? Do you harbor any regrets?
I feel as if the international community and the Bosnian Muslims are blowing this out of proportion. I recognize my crimes in the war, but I deny that I ever took part of a genocide.
21 years after this terrible event, many families are still searching for the bodies of their loved ones. It is estimated that 20,000 people are still labeled as missing in Bosnia. Efforts to retrieve and identify the missing have been hindered by the action of Bosnian Serb officials, who after the end of the genocide moved the bodies buried in mass graves to other locations in an attempt to conceal their actions. Victims of rape are abandoned by their families or cast out from their communities, and few have received any help from the Bosnian government. Many women are impoverished and suffer from depression as well as PTSD. The children born from this traumatic event are stigmatized by society and are often given up by their mothers and sent to live in orphanages. These children are basically invisible in the eyes of the state. The International War Crimes Tribunal has not established any particular guidelines for international or state responses to rape victims, and so these women and children are forced to live a life of shame and hardship, even after the genocide has ended. Although many are still trying to recover from the aftermath of the genocide, some justice has been served. The UN Security Council, called the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, had brought in more than 160 government, military, and police officials for crimes committed against Muslim Bosniaks and Croats. Of the people convicted, the most notable are former Presidents Milošević and Ravadan. Trials are to be completed later this year. Although justice is being handed out on those responsible, the tension between Croats, Bosnian Serbs, and Muslim Bosniaks remain a constant due to religious differences and past wrongs. We must remind the world that genocide is not something to ignore. As human beings, we have a duty to protect those under the threat of extermination and ensure that it never happens again. It would be a blight upon human integrity if we allowed such a crime to happen again in our world.